I was commissioned in 1969 and moved to the retired roles in 2004. Although as a general officer, I am still subject to recall to the United States. I was commissioned into the Air Defense Artillery from Fort Bliss, Texas. I have one combat tour, which was to Vietnam in 1970-71. Commanded basically starting at the captain's level, where I commanded a headquarters detachment of the 1st Brigade of the 70th Division, which is United States Army Reserve. I've also commanded a battalion in the reserves. I've commanded at brigade level. Then as a 1-star, I commanded the 300 Military Police in Inkster, Michigan. And then as a 2-star, the 84th Division Training, which is designated at that time infantry. I went to the University of Pittsburgh in 1965. In 1965, the University of Pittsburgh was still required to have ROTC for all males. So I joined ROTC it was mandatory. I decided to stay into ROTC. I had come from an African American community in Pittsburgh, and my father, who had served in World War II, had said it is best to go in as an officer. Therefore, I decided to stay in the ROTC the 3rd and 4th year and get commissioned as an officer. So I was commissioned as a reserve officer from the University of Pittsburgh in August of 1969. You are aware as a general officer, unless I turn my commission in, I'm still subject to recall. Even though you have a date that you were commissioned into the military and you were moved to the retired reserve, I just want, because I'm still doing things. Like I take a U.S. delegation to South America, and so under the auspices of DOD. So I'm not on active duty, but I'm just making it aware that since coming on within the Army and I entered the Army was desegregated in 1948 by President Truman. Also, the Army has gone to boards, promotion boards, and various type of boards, and even took it a step further that on the boards, in many cases, a minority was required to be on the board. So that progression upward allowed for looking at more than just what is called the good old boys club, as they used to say. Additionally, the Department of Defense created the Race Relations Equal Opportunity, called DOMI, at Patrick Air Force Base, was its headquarters, which I had gone and been trained as a Race Relations Equal Opportunity officer. So this was to help educate the military on the various cultural diversities throughout the military and how people may look at things. So that's been very significant changes for the time that Colonel Young went in and the time that we have come through as officers 100 years later. But I can recall an incident that when I was in the ROTC summer camp, that several white cadets came to me and said, "Oh, our TAC officer is Major such and such. He's from a southern school, and there's no way you're going to be a distinguished military graduate." And I am not saying I would have made the distinguished graduate, but I was told no way up front. When I was a full colonel, and I was in Washington, D.C. for a meeting of some time, the 2-star came to me and asked me, "We've got a predominantly black unit out of the South. We will change your orders, and will you take them over to war in Iraq?" My answer to the general was, having gone to war once and believed to be the only one that survived my unit, my group that went over the war in Vietnam. People died in war. If ordered to go, I will be ready to go. But I'm not going to volunteer to go back to war. But yet I was asked, because it was a predominantly black unit out of the South, would I take command as an '06 and take him over to Iraq. One of the things I did notice, when I was out of uniform, I can remember I was at Fort Bliss, Fort Campbell. If I was out of uniform, people viewed me only as a sergeant. I was not an officer. But I made a point to understand the military culture. I made sure I went to the social gatherings. If the colonel was having a, quote, happy hour, I showed up. I was not going to be one of those who was aloof from the troops. So they at least knew my face and knew I was present, and they could not write in my officer fishing report, does not participate as a team player and not around. So I took that, I made sure I was always participating in whatever events. Whether we had a softball game against another unit or something, I would participate as them. The other thing that I did to watch yourself is that you had a consistent date. If you were not single and you showed up with a lot of different women, they may brand you as a player, and therefore. So I was very particular on when I brought a person to an event, I tried to take the same person, especially when I was in the reserve. So I was not branded, and I ended up marrying the one. As a matter of fact, our first date was on the military function. So I was cognizant of certain social norms that would work against you, because everything that's in performance, it was sometimes you had to understand the soft skills or the perceptions, and therefore I was not going to be perceived as a black officer only chasing women, but I was going to be a participant of the officer corps. I also learned to understand about networking, enjoying professional organizations. At that time, I joined the Reserve Officers Association, which had over 100,000 members at the time. And this allowed me, in many cases, to meet future mentors, people who sat on my board, and they got to know who I was, because in many cases, I was one or two that would show up at some of the events, but at least my face was known. So therefore, that helped me, I believe. I came out of a basically white institution, University of Pittsburgh. But there were only 17 African American blacks in my whole freshman class out of 1,000. So, no, I'm not even sure at the time I went there was even 100 on the whole probably was. So therefore, I understood certain things about working in the Caucasian world that were so that helped prepare me, I think, for my military career. I know once, because I was African American or black, they needed an officer for the 4th of July celebration, and I was chosen and was to go as the and I knew I was the representative on the 4th of July with the various officers. I was one. The commanding general's daughter at Fort Campbell came home with her roommate who was black. Guess which lieutenant was requested to go out with the roommate? So that. As far as assignments, I cannot really say that there's really been any assignments. The boards have sent me to units, and that I've just moved forth with that. When I've gone overseas, and yes, I have encountered some stairs, and especially when I deal with going to South America with another organization where I've been general, they would quite often come in and say, "We have not seen a black general down here," you know. And so I've had some of those comments through my career. You're the first. Never seen, you know. And so therefore sometimes you get into conversations about stereotypes. Mr. You could only at that time rise to Major General, 2 stars. You would have had to cross over to be on active duty 24/7 to be able to go as high as 4 stars. As far as the advent of boards and minority representation on boards opened up the doors and allowed upward mobility, I think, for myself and numerous other soldiers, whether they be enlisted or officer. So I cannot say that I felt that, other than being a reserve officer versus a regular officer, the glass ceilings. But one also has to understand that the military culture on glass ceilings sometimes depending on mentorship and sponsors. And that when you got up into the general ranks and higher, you did need some political network to help move you forward. Caspar Weinberger was a mentor to Colin Powell. He was Secretary of Defense. I think both of us had perseverance and drive to succeed and not quit. Persevered the situation and environment around us. The drive to succeed was, I'm not going to let them drive me away. I'm going to prove that I am worth being here and why I need to be moved forward. We also believe that the regulations changed. And so therefore, with regulations changing and the boards and things like that, that helped us move forward in many cases. Okay. We also understood that we were a minority, and in many cases we were to assume the role of role model, and that we weren't going to let the system beat us down. We were going to break stereotypes, and I think that's what part of us did, broke stereotypes that blacks were not as educated, blacks could not speak the King's English correctly. We were always out chasing people, women and everything, and that was not the case. We were devoted family men to our families and to our country. And so we broke a lot of the norms. So I think both of us had that in them, that whether consciously or subconsciously, we knew we were role models and had to set the standards. And that standard included military bearing, which was very, very, very key. Understanding military culture, which is different than civilian culture. I think I had the advantage because I was living in 2 worlds simultaneously. The military culture in many cases puts you in a cocoon, and therefore the times of the day and what's going on, you are basically shielded from, because you're living on a military base, all your people that you're interacting with are military, and therefore what's going on in the civilian outside those gates, in many cases you're not in tune to whether it be political or social, economic, what's going on. Where I was living in both worlds. So that gave me an advantage to go back and forth that I don't think Colonel Young had at the time. One thing that still stands to this day in Vietnam was I was out on patrol with my interpreter, and I noticed the Vietnamese in this small village were walking around me in a circle. I asked my interpreter what was going on, and he said, they're looking for your tail, because they were told that blacks had tails. That was a cultural fact. Stop for a second. But that is, I had heard that before, you know, blacks' tails. And so that actually happened to me, where they actually were looking for my tail. Um, Call names every now and then. When I was at Fort Benning, Georgia, and I'd gone over to a college and I was coming back. They also told me, because I carried Pennsylvania tags from the north, to stick my military cap in the back right corner. That if you got stopped, they see you in the military, in many cases, they might give you a break as a black in the South. So I'm coming back about 2 o'clock in the morning from Alabama on my way back to Fort Benning, Georgia. I get pulled over by the Alabama State Police. And he says, "Where are you going?" I said, "Fort Benning." "Okay, you're a soldier boy." I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "How much money you got?" $30 or $40. "That's your ticket." I was not going to argue at that time. So, hold on. But we were told from Pennsylvania, New York, Michigan, Ohio, that have a piece of your uniform in your back window in some of the southern posts. And so that did happen to me there. And as I stated before, out of uniform many times, I was considered a sergeant. Now, many times in uniform, I had several soldiers walk past me and I salute. I'd stop them because I was not going to set a new standard. Some would even claim, "I didn't see your rank. Give me a break on that one." You want to say they just assumed. So, but I did have those many posts. I mean, even all the way through general, there would be people who didn't think that I was a black general. When I reported to Fort Campbell as my first duty station, home in the 101st Airborne, there were two unique things that you need to understand about racism. One, you report to the brigade commander as a second lieutenant. But my father and people had told me, also go make an office call on the brigade command sergeant major. Who really, because the sergeant major and the senior NCOs had the ear of the colonel about your performance and your professionalism. So I reported to the command sergeant major, who said, when I reported, "Boy, come here." I quickly learned to understand whether you were white, Hispanic, when you reported to this particular sergeant major, command sergeant major Vanderkamp, everyone was a boy. So you also, in racism, have to be able to discern what is the system, what is the person, and the environment where you are. If I had reacted wrong, I could have ended my military career right there at Fort Campbell as a second lieutenant. Because he said boy. But learning that he called everyone a boy when they came to see him, therefore, that was not racism. So you have to always understand the difference and stay cognizant of that fact. The other thing was, on assignments at Fort Campbell, there was a training officer, but the assignment officer said, the stockade is all 70% black. Would you consider going down to help out in the stockade? And I did that. Going against my father's wishes, says never volunteer for anything in the Army. So I went down there. But when I came to find out on why so many African American soldiers or black soldiers went AWOL, in the African American culture, the grandmother in many cases is revered higher than the mother. And so consequently, if grandma died, serious injury, needed something, the grandson would go. Army regulation only recognized immediate family. But this was a fact of African American culture. They would go. and they would go AWOL and come back and face the consequences, but grandma needed them. So that was something I learned from listening and understanding the reason why so many African American soldiers were in the stockade at Campbell. That was just one of the reasons. I became a racial relations equal opportunity officer, trained, presented classes on it. Also, even in Vietnam, I taught race relations equal opportunity as a course uh, to my fellow officers. So, because of that training, I think I've contributed. And part of my training was a tape that I remember from Raymond Massey on the way you were, and it gave you a sense of how people would think based on the environment they came up with and their other factors of the environment. And this helped me create a sensitivity to understanding how a person might look at certain things. Because if a person never had seen blacks, as when I got to the University of Pittsburgh first time, or even got to Fort Bliss, when someone said they had never seen a black officer, in some cases, black person, they weren't lying. They physically had. So their perceptions be what they heard about or what they've been told by their parents. And there you could help educate and move them along. Yes, I've had those. You're not like I thought you would be. Or you're not typical. And you want to go back and say, well, what's typical? So, yes, I've encountered that. So I think through that, I've sat on boards, promotion boards, this is an officer. Just to level the playing field from the standpoint of not just trying to promote minorities, but the fact is taking the best soldiers, looking at their records, looking at their pictures, military bearings, stuff like that, so that it was not just because they were this, they got it. No, I looked at the whole soldier and on the promotion board. So I think I made a difference there. I also believe I made a difference in that as people saw me rise in rank, it gave them inspiration to stay in the service and achieve. The military is a defined, in many ways, culture. Yet, in the military, you have all the social strata of America. Many cases in a civilian career, such as in a Fortune 500 company, they've only recruited a certain type. So you would not have the complete social stratification that you would have, which would in some cases lend itself to working around the stereotypes or having to prove yourself different. The military also, by its system, forced recognition, and many people found out that black blood was the same color as white blood when people got shot, which changed metamorphously mindsets and thinkings as many people came back as best buddies because you were taught on the buddy system for survival. And then in war and combat and military stress, the color went out, the race went out. It's like, oh, you got my back. Okay. You get over to the civilian world, it can be dog eat dog on promotions and stuff like that. And it can be cliquish. Now, in the case, I worked for Ford Motor Company, so my name was not on the Ford building, so therefore, sometimes you need a network. Exo Ford actually came through the division I was in. Well, you know he was going up. Okay. So you might have had that disadvantage unless, in the case, there was a Ford vice president who had been a roommate of one of the Ford sons, and he came to Ford and he progressed. So there was networking going on. You were probably in many cases in the civilian world proving, getting around the stereotypes. But you also got to remember now, if you were in business for yourself, that's a different dynamic than working for a company. So business ethics and things like that all were different, and in the communities that you served would be different. What was your what was your business? So therefore, I think there'd be different things you could run into on the business. As far as straight racism, um, the corporate world had its own boards, but of course you weren't privy to them. So if you didn't impress managers and stuff like that, or have network, you probably didn't go up. I did make sure that I joined the golf league, understanding that that was part of the rounded person, so that they can say he was not a loner. He does participate as a group, and as the society and business moved more to group participation, that was a very, very, very key point. The military had, in my time, very strict educational rules, and if you didn't meet those goal timelines, you could be put out. I always stayed 1 or 2 years ahead when you had to have something done so that you would not be put out. And so I overachieved. Now that's one of the things that I'd say was also you had to do in the military. You had to overachieve. I was not just air defense artillery. I was also qualified infantry, military police, military intelligence, adjutant general. Why adjutant general? The pen is mightier than the sword, especially when you had to write your own OERs. And so I learned how to write the right words to help promote myself when I was told, write your own OER. In some cases, that works also in the civilian world too. In the civilian world, I didn't just have a bachelor's, I have a master's in business administration, but I had a double master's. I had one in finance and industrial relations. Why industrial relations? Because the managers of the future had to be HR professionals. So you overachieved to make sure that they could not say you weren't qualified. I had more than needed to get to the next round. So that was one of the things I did. And in the military, I chose to take command as best I could, because rank went with command and the type of service unit you had. In the Fortune 500 world, you took on some assignments. I got Six Sigma belt, which was additional. And as I said, some of the social things, I made sure I stayed up on the social matter. Golf, I knew how to play bridge, so that they could not say was not culture-fied. I am the current board president for the Michigan Military Veterans Hall of Honor, which is the only chartered military group in the state of Michigan by both the governor and the House and Senate to promote the historical aspects of people from Michigan who have made a difference in the military, either in their military career or in their civilian career, using the skills they picked up in the military. I am currently the board chair of that. I am also currently the chief U.S. delegate to a group called UPORFA. This is made up of countries that have reserves in the Americas. Canada, Canada, I think that has a reserve, U.S. On down, we got Colombia's in it, Peru's in it, Paraguay's in it. And so I'm the head delegate for the United States delegation that goes to the group that's called UPORFA. Sanctioned by DOD and have had good relations with Southcom, which is the four-star command that overlooks the Americas. I had also, at one time been the vice president to Europe, which would have been with the NATO countries, but I'm now South American vice president, or they call chief U.S. delegate. I am a current member of the American Legion, VFW, Vietnam, VVA, disabled vets, because I have a disability, and so I kept my memberships up in those. Most of them probably all like memberships. I've been the past president of the Reserve Officers Association, which is one of the few 4 or 5 charter groups from Congress. I advocating a strong national defense. I have testified in front of Congress. I can present papers to Congress because we are chartered by Congress, the Reserve Organization of America, at what time was known as the Reserve Officers Association. So I'm still doing that. Presentation and things around the state. I'm scheduled to do one on the 31st, a dedication of a library in Detroit, the Michigan Veterans Foundation. So I've stayed involved in veterans causes, trying to voice some concerns about things that are needed, understanding the system as best we can with the VA. I do use the VA, the Dingo VA, and so I am familiar with the VA system. So I just try to help out, let my rank help out. Praise goes down, but if my rank can help open some doors for some veterans, then I'm willing to do that. And so therefore, I still get requests, can you look into this, can you help me get an answer? And in many cases, I can help channel people to the right direction, the right agency to help them. Now, if I don't know something, I just tell a person, I do not know. I've heard of the system, and this is maybe where you may want to start here. This designates the rank. When you make general officer, you do not wear a branch. So therefore, as a general officer, I'm supposed to be a general of all branches. Okay. Right shoulder. You turn in the Army, right shoulder. This is my combat patch. Vietnam, under the Southern Cross. I'm an American, so that they know I'm American. Okay. Name tag, U.S. Army. Technically, in a combat zone, if you do not have this, you can be shot under the Geneva Convention as a spy. That patch is usually your unit patch, because I've now technically gone to the retired reserve. This is the what's called ARPACEN out of St. Louis, Army Reserve Personnel Center, St. Louis. But I've worn the patches at the 84th Division, 300th Military Police. I've had the AmeriCal patch on the left, on the units I've served. This was the BDU camouflage. Many times you will have here sometimes some earplugs hanging down for artillery, because I was assigned to an artillery battalion, and you do need earplugs around 8-inch guns sometimes. Mission as a second lieutenant, University of Pittsburgh, August 15, 1969. I had been an aide de camp. In this case, I was with a British military general. I was working for another American general, but at an event where we were working with the British, I was aide de camp, and I was assigned to help him out. Made it to 2 stars and the president of the Reserve Officers Association. I got invited to the White House for breakfast with the president and the Secretary of Defense at that time, Rumsfeld. And I also got to present my own wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier after the president. I was in that same ceremony. I was selected for Fortune magazine to be the cover. Business goes to war, because this is when reservists going to war. And they said, people have commented, they said, well, you're not smiling. War is serious business. And then this technically would be my retirement photo to the retired reserve.